We are Ant and Deck, aren't we?
I don't know which one's which.
I've always rather wanted to have sex in a compost.
Oh, God. No, James. No, please. Too early in the podcast for that.
Hello and welcome to the Scribehound Gardening podcast. My name is James Alexander-Sinclair and I'm here with...
Joe Swift.
Together we are today going to be talking about the world's best, biggest and most well-known flower show. I am of course talking about the RHS Chelsea Flower Show.
And we'll also be answering some of the questions that you've sent in. Well, trying to answer them anyway.
So Scribehound Gardening to be more specific. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've found myself writing my piece for a month and thinking, oh, I want to write another one now.
No, one a month is enough. Especially from you, James. Yeah, there's 30 writers and they each write one a month. And so there's one going out every single day and they also read what they've written.
You want people who you know can write and can be entertaining. You want some people who are going to be serious and some people who are going to be less serious. Some people who are going to write about people, some people who are going to write about gardens, some people who are going to write about plants, some people who are going to write about, I mean, God knows what, basically. And that's what's exciting about it, is the eclecticism of the whole thing. Because like you, I've sort of written for magazines and it's sort of two things. Either you have to go and look at a garden and then be nice about it. and sometimes
when you don't want to be, you want to be more critical.
Well, sometimes I've sort of sat and I've spoken to the garden owner, and you do it as if you were visiting a client. You say, "This bit's fantastic, and that bit over there it's a bit shit, actually, isn't it?" And they'll say, "Well, yes, it is actually, because we haven't got round to it, or however it goes." But you can never say that. Yeah. In a magazine.
I read about lawns and the environmental impact. I read about a Japanese sort of pilgrimage to a Japanese garden that I just will always live with me. And I've there's no other medium I've had that chance.
Okay, so most of us sort of knew each other or knew of each other, and now we're all together. We're sort of a community between writers. We're a gang. Yeah, we're like the Sharks and the
We're in a
Jets.
band.
We're in a band. It's like maybe that's the next thing. Is we can have the Scribehound Gardening band. You play the bass.
I'm a bass player. Yeah.
Mark Giacono plays the bass.
Oh no, we can't have too many bass.
We're going to have loads of them. I don't know what I'm very, very good at the triangle.
Oh well, we need one of those. You've always got to have a good triangle.
You have to have a good triangular. Gardening can sometimes be bewildering, which is why I am so pleased that we have snuggled up with our friends at Crocus for this podcast series. As you probably know, Crocus is the most trusted online gardening brand. Their website is stuffed full of advice, inspiration, and of course, plants and products to help bring your dream garden to life. Check out Crocus's website to find out more. If you find something that you just cannot resist, use the code SCRIBEHOUND20 at the checkout to enjoy 20% off all full-price plants until October the 31st, which is, of course, Halloween. So when was the first Chelsea Flower Show you attended?
Oh, it was in 1898, I think, James. Yes, it was. That was a lovely one, wasn't it? Do you remember? Yeah, Alan was there. You were there. I think it was before I studied garden design in 1990. I think I was probably, because I was a landscaper, and I think it was. I remember Dan Pearson did an amazing roof garden, and
that's quite recent.
Jeff Hamilton was filming it, and I remember watching them filming it. And when was that? It was maybe
90
when I was studying garden design in 90. That's not that recent, James.
No,
it's a good sort of 35 years ago, but that was quite recent, isn't it? Yeah.
I went when I was a landscaper.
Well, you're a lot older than me, remember?
I am much older. I have to be reminded of that.
I'm only a young lad.
Otherwise, I'd just forget, wouldn't I? I went when I was a landscaper as well. And you know the bit at the end where you get cheap plants? And it used to finish on a Friday.
The selloff.
Then they had the selloff.
Yeah, the charity
selloff. And there was I came with the wheelbarrow. When I first started Chelsea, because I knew, it gets some cheap plants at that point. You didn't have to pay after 4 o'clock because it was sort of closing down. So I just came in from the embankment with the wheelbarrow and bought some plants and went out again.
Loaded up.
My first
Where did you live? You didn't live in the Midlands then, did you?
No, we lived in South London. Because also you could park in London in those days, and I would just park the truck.
And did you put them in your own garden, or did you sell them to a client?
I sold them to a client.
You would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course.
Ah.
I didn't want them, so I went and sold them. Because there's that whole thing about people going on a bus with a 9-foot delphinium, which is always
I know. Well, I used to film that bit. We used to film it live, the sell-off, and I used to stand by boring entrances. But then people got really savvy and they'd queue up, waiting to go. Oh, I've got to go all the way to how are you getting home? I'm on my bike, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And they'd be there with this sort of 12-foot delphinium that's going to last about a week, and they've paid 20 quid for. But a lot of it goes to charity.
It has. Yes, it does. It has changed a lot since then.
The flower gardens don't sell off now.
Well, some of them do, but not nearly as much as they used to, because they've always got to go somewhere else.
They go to. That's one of the great things recently. Is
it's one of the best things.
They've got the legacy. They go to a home for life, which is great.
I mean, it's not like a care home. It's like a proper
some
home.
Of them go to care.
Some of them do. Because my first garden at Chelsea I did in 1999.
Yeah,
and they basically picked it up and put it in a skip at the end of it.
Yeah.
Basically came along, and I remember this guy with a big metal bar going bang through the bottom of the pond, and all the water just trickled out. Oh. And then we just skipped it. And that's I think possibly one of the biggest changes that happened in Chelsea over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Is that every garden is at Chelsea for 5 days, and then it has to go somewhere else. And I do a certain amount of the selection of gardens, so I sort of choose which gardens are coming. And that's just one of the questions you have to ask. So where's it going?
Yeah, it's really important, I think, yeah. No, but it has changed. I mean, obviously, it's seen as the catwalk of garden design, Chelsea. And, often you do see things there that, go into the mainstream sort of gardening side of things a few years later. But on the whole, most gardeners aren't fashion-led at all, are they, really? If you go around, an average town or, anywhere, you don't see sort of Chelsea-influenced gardens, really, I don't think.
It's one of the annoying things that newspapers ask.
Every
ring
year
you as well.
ask,
what are the trends?
Yes.
And you say, I don't bloody know. I don't really care.
No.
It's some things will trickle down.
But if you had a garden that was 20 years ago that you put there now, a lot of them would feel very dated.
It would be very, very dated.
So there is something moving.
There used to be, again, about that time, there used to be two big companies who used to one garden alternate years, and they would basically build a rockery.
Yeah.
On the rock bank, which is why it was called that, because every garden was a rockery once in sort of back in the 50s and stuff. But this was right up to the 90s, and there was Dougie Knight was one. And I can't remember who the other one was, but they didn't talk to each other, so you couldn't have them both at the show at the same time. And they would build this rockery, and it would look amazing, and people would come along, and they would sell 2 or 3 of them, which is nothing that isn't going to happen. And they're basically doing it for work and for potential punters, which is sort of doesn't happen quite so much anymore. I think that maybe the whole idea of a garden designer has changed.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the whole garden design thing has changed. I mean, in the old days, I remember going and, there was a rockery. There was always a lot of formal gardens. I remember seeing my first Tom Stewart Smith garden, Dan Pearce, and more contemporary designers, and that was really exciting. Yeah. I remember. So, and Christopher Bradley Hull.
Yes, amazing. His Latin garden.
His Latin Virgil garden was, unbelievable. But a lot of people just didn't like it, didn't get it. A bit minimalist, and that really did change gardens and garden design, I think, because you did start seeing that in contemporary gardens and city gardens, and people really sort of took that stuff on board. Sometimes it's materials, it's a plant palette, but it does take a while to filter through. I think sustainability in planting, there was a whole cow parsley wild garden thing quite a few years ago.
There was.
If you saw a very super formal garden in Chelsea now that was very high maintenance or something, I mean, it would be like a stage set. It might not look out of place, but I don't think people would.
People wouldn't relate to it nearly as much. Because there was the Tom Stewart Smiths and the Dan Pearson gardens that were there, and then there was a prison that used to do gardens every year.
Leyhill Prison.
And they were very naturalistic. They were much more like
they all done a run though, didn't they? That year, do you remember? They all ran off down the King's Road, and no one saw them again. And before the tag was invented,
but they were little bits of nature.
Yeah.
which is again what you kind of have coming back into gardens now is a certain amount of that. So you've been filming there for
24 years.
24 years.
Yeah.
So what was the first year that you filmed? It was you and Alan.
2001. Dermot
was there.
Yeah. It was, I can't remember.
That was just after it came back because it used to be Channel 4.
Channel 4 did it, yeah.
Which was Monty and Anne-Marie, I think.
Monty, Anne-Marie, Carol, I think was part of that. And then the Bee got it, and I was doing Garden as well, and Alan was the only one who had sort of done any live TV or as live, and we all just ran around like really scared and didn't have a clue what was going on. And Alan was the calming because he'd done Pebble Mill.
Yeah.
So he was a very experienced live presenter, and he took us all under his wing and sort of.
And he designed gardens at Chelsea as well before because he did one. There's a fantastic picture of him in a bow tie.
Yeah.
Which he did one for Country Living or something like that. And he's wearing a sort of pastel-coloured blazer and a bow tie. It looks quite extraordinary. And he'd done that garden, and so obviously Alan is Alan, and Alan can sort of cope with pretty much anything at all, can't he?
Yeah.
So was it the same format? Was it you sitting on the roof looking down at things?
Well, no, it was Dermot and Alan, and then they sort of wrote me in after a couple of years of that. I was a reporter.
Yeah.
And so I used to go and make silly films, and they used to dress me up quite a lot.
But one of you dressed up as Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I love that. There was a director called Sarah Sarkle, so imaginative, and I was looking for a selection of plants, like the prettiest plants, and I had a leather jacket and a hat and a whip.
Yeah.
I was sort of rolling around under gardens and through marquees and everyone. It was just, they used to make little self-contained 5-minute films. She would create some, and I'd just go along with it. And I mean, sometimes I look like a complete lemon, and it didn't work. Sometimes, at one point I was dressed in a pinafore, and I'd had my nails painted. Do you remember when Dermot had his balls, his coloured balls?
Yes, I do. Yes.
So he did this garden with all these different coloured balls.
It was good, that garden.
Yeah, and they wanted to paint all my toenails and fingernails in the same colour as Dermot's balls, but I didn't go that far, but I did end up looking ridiculous one way or another. I was totally stitched up, frankly. So I learnt my lesson with that.
It was quite fun because I was the royal correspondent for a bit.
Were you?
Thought, well, who's going to follow the Queen?
Nicholas Witchell.
I was Nicholas Witchell.
You were Nicholas
or Jenny Bond.
Jenny.
All that kind of thing. And I basically had to go and follow the Queen round. I did it for about 5 years.
You do that anyway.
And they obviously thought, okay, who's the one who's least,
who's got
least
a double-barreled
exactly,
name? Who's posh?
Least likely to misbehave himself? Oh, St. James. And so I would go and follow the Queen round, and she would go and speak to somebody who's done a garden, and then my job would be to jump in after and say, "So what did she say? What did she say to you?" And they said, "Well, she said hello," and "Oh, you've got a lovely garden," and then kept moving. And so that I did that for a while, and I did those little films like you did, and doing stuff.
They're fun, actually.
They are quite fun. I did a very good one about cactus, which I'll show you one day. It was called the Cactus Liberation Front.
Is it cactus or cacti?
Depends how many you've got.
Well, so you got more than one.
Then I think it would be a cacti. Or it wouldn't be some cacti, it would be rather than a cactus.
It wouldn't be a cacti.
It would be a cactus and some cacti.
Someone spent a lot of money on your education.
I know.
Didn't they?
But the cactus people...
Yes.
The cactus people at Chelsea are quite fun. But the same cactus keep coming back.
Oh.
Because, okay, so we got the gardens and then we go into the Great Pavilion. And do you remember the Great Pavilion when it was canvas?
Yes.
And it was like really low and it dripped.
Yeah.
In the mornings and all that stuff.
Was that sweat or was it just humidity? I never quite knew what that was.
It was fresh morning dew.
Was it? With people hosing down their plants and then a bit of sun and
then it would
get really hot and sweaty.
But then they went into the sort of bigger one, and then there's all these extraordinary nurseries in there. And there were 2 cactus nurseries. And I did this piece, and there was this cactus. There was an is it called armillaria?
Yeah,
something like that. Anyway, it had been to every single Chelsea for 40 years.
This cactus.
Same cactus. It's all right, dust you off, chuck you in the van, we'll take you to Chelsea.
The Cactus Society once started on me. They started on me because I once said on telly, I said, cactus, your kids love to start, with cactus. Yeah. I said, they're really easy. You just got to water them twice a year, at Christmas and on your birthday, as long as your birthday isn't on Christmas. Right? So, it was only a joke. And anyway, they started on me. They started getting in touch with, the BBC and my agent and saying that I had to formally apologise. I have formally apologised quite a few times on the television. And then I once said about some guy's bonsai, he'd said this bonsai's worth 35 grand.
Oh, I remember
it's
this.
35 grand, this bonsai. So I did this piece of camera. I said, see this bonsai, it's amazing. It's, it's 300 years old. It's gone from generation to generation. It's a beautiful thing. It's worth 35 grand. Anyway, a week later, someone broke into his nursery and nicked it, and he wanted me to, I don't know what he wanted me to pay for it, but he wanted me to apologise on telly and talk about it and talk about his nursery and exactly where it was again. I was like, no, they're just going to break it again and nick all your other bonsais. Yeah, I've got in a bit of trouble over the years.
There've been bits. I tell you what I like. I like your banana story. Tell me your banana story.
Oh, well, that was, yeah. Well, we talked about gnomes earlier. That was like me. I was sitting on a rock in front of a pond. It was the first year I'd ever filmed Chelsea. I'm sitting on this rock. All I needed was a fishing rod, and I'd have looked at home. And it was the old analog communication. So we all get a runner at Chelsea. It's the only place we get a runner who basically tell you when you can eat and when you're allowed to go to the loo and where you've got to be next, because it's quite chaotic.
Yeah.
And now it's all digital, so that like telephones, and so everyone's a bit more on it. But I was sitting there, and because I started at about 6 o'clock in the morning, you get to mid-morning and you're absolutely ravenous and you haven't had a cup of tea or anything. So I'm sitting on this rock with an audience in front of me, because that's another thing about filming at Chelsea. You got everyone watches you film and loves it when you get it wrong. Absolutely just waiting for you to make him say, oh, he's made a mistake. Brilliant. And it's quite nerve-wracking. I'm sitting there on this rock and my runner comes up to me and says, can I get you anything? And I was like, oh, well, is it lunchtime soon? He's like, look, no, it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh, what? I said, is there any chance of a banana? Because, well, I like a banana.
You like a
right?
banana.
I like a banana mid-morning.
Mid-morning banana sets you up.
At my age, you can't walk past a nice bunch of banana, and think, well, I might want one of those later. You just buy them and put them in the car. Anyway, so the old, Chinese whispers with the analog thing went back to our hub, and about 10 minutes later, this thing gets passed along the line. But no, it's not a banana; it's a can of lager, right? Yeah, it's a can of like Tennant's or something that they've managed to find from somewhere. So this can's getting passed along the line. I'm sitting in front and everyone's nudging each other. Oh, look, Joe's got a bit of a problem. It's only 10 o'clock in the morning.
Breakfast.
So it gets to me. Someone comes up to me and goes, here, this is the can of lager you want. And I had to say really loudly, oh no, I didn't want a can of lager. I wanted a banana, like that. And it was really, yeah.
I love that.
And that happened.
It's great. Fantastic.
And now, that wouldn't go down too well. And also, these days, you can't get any alcohol out of the BBC anyway, so that was never going to happen.
It's going to the shed of somebody's garden where it'd be full of boxes of champagne.
Exactly.
How it sort of
It's
works.
the only way you can get a drink at Chelsea.
So you've been filming. I've been probably judging for the last 20 odd years and wondering.
Yeah, you're like a bit of a guru. Like, you're a mentor, Chelsea mentor. You help a lot of designers, but you also, the hardest thing about being a judge is say you've given everyone thinks they're going to get a gold medal, right? My garden's the best thing in the whole show. And you've given them a silver.
Yeah.
And you have to give them feedback.
Yeah. It is quite hard.
Has anyone punched you yet?
I've got very close to that. I've been backed up against a bin by 3 large landscapers, and they were sort of saying, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I'm saying, "Yes, actually, it's fine. Don't worry." All this is going on, and so we got sort of close to that. But it's one of those things that everybody they've been working on this for a year. They put their heart, their soul, their savings, their marriages on hold. Everything is there so that they can make this garden.
Yeah.
And basically, they've got to the end of the show. They're very tired. They're very sort of emotionally drawn. I liken it to somebody who's got a toddler.
They're fully invested.
Yeah. They've got a toddler and they've just given them 4 packets of Skittles. And they're now bouncing off the walls and they can't sleep and they can't stay awake and all this sort of stuff is going on. And they think their garden is amazing. And I basically have to come up to them at that point, which is on the Tuesday, and say, I'm really sorry, but it's like coming up to somebody who's just had a baby and saying, I'm really sorry, but your baby is quite ugly. which is the same thing. You say, look, I'm afraid it's not quite as good as it is, and the reasons why. But we try and do it as scientifically as possible because all judging is very objective. It's not about what I like or what you like. I mean, you're sitting there and you say, well, I like that one, I like that one. I can't do that as a judge. I can do that as James, but I can't do it as a judge. So I have to say, the reason why your baby is ugly is because of this, and this, and you have to explain exactly what it is. And sometimes people take it well. I mean, the thing you have to realize before you start is there is no VAR in this. And you don't get a second chance. I'm not going to change my mind. None of It's not just me.
No,
it's seven judges who've thought about it.
It's the whole process, and it's a box ticking exercise.
Yeah, it's not a box ticking exercise.
No, okay.
It's a matter of going
ticking.
through various
It's
criteria.
a ticking the boxes exercise. Is that how I meant to phrase it?
No. I think it's there are boxes.
There's numbers
and there are ticks
and numbers.
Numbers, because that's the only way to do it.
But some judges don't give feedback because it's the hardest part of the job, isn't it?
It's probably, it is. It's tough. It is quite hard.
Hello, Joe and James.
Somebody's listening.
From Priya. I live in a second floor flat with a small balcony and I'm desperate to turn it into a little green oasis. The problem is I have zero sun for most of the day. What's funny about that?
I'm sorry, Priya, that was rude. Yes.
Yeah. Are there any plants that actually enjoy the shade, or am I doomed to a life of fake plants and sadness? There's loads of plants that shade-loving plants.
There is a difference between shade and complete darkness, though. I mean, we're not in darkness, are we?
Well, no. Well, maybe there's no sun, but there might be ambient light. But there's a lot of shade. I mean, you got to think woodland, deep woodland.
Yeah, no, absolutely fine.
Ferns, obviously. I would go for which can do well in containers. And there's things like sarcococca, which is a lovely winter scented plant.
Let's say, I tell you the one that is quite good for shady bits. For your shady bits. We all say ferns and all that stuff. There's actually quite a pretty yellow grass called Milium Mephuseum Bowles Gold, I think. Do you know that one? Yeah. Which actually, because otherwise it gets a bit dark. Because what you're thinking is the middle of the wood. Okay? Middle of the wood is a bit dark. It's a bit spooky. It's a bit Red Riding Hood, isn't it, really? And so you want little perky bits of light that come through it as well, and that's quite nice, that little grass.
Well, also, something you can very rarely grow in a city, hostas, right? Because of slugs and snails, right? I'm hoping on a balcony that they don't do that, because they're not going to crawl up the side.
They abseil.
They're not going to abseil in.
They're
not
do.
Abseiling in, but you can grow them well, and there's some ones with really lovely gold and silver margins and variegated leaves and, big leaves, and they obviously grow very well in shade. Those
that would work. I mean, I think you'd be.
And obviously, you've got your Fatsia japonica.
Your Fatsia japonica,
glossy leaf was actually completely bomb-proof plant.
And your Fatsedera.
And your Fatsedera elizii.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't get them anymore, though.
I got one last year. I've got one in my garden.
It's like nice.
It's like a climbing Fatsia.
Yeah. It's not self-clinging, though. It might need.
No.
You can sellotape it.
You have to nail it to a wall somewhere.
The first gardening job I ever did, someone actually had sellotaped an ivy to the wall.
I think they do.
And then I thought, well, I can do this.
We do that.
If they can do that, I could be a gardener as well. I've got some sellotape. They actually sellotape this, and they call themselves a professional gardener. This person.
So provided that you're using quite narrow stuff that comes around. But on the slug thing, just as a word of warning, I lived in a flat in Earl's Court at one point, and we used to have slugs every morning that would come in the house. You go down, you wake up in the morning, you stumble through into the kitchen, and there will be slugs eating the cat food. And so they can get pretty much anywhere. Although it must say that actually at that same place we actually found a ginger cat in the kitchen cupboard once. So I don't quite know how anything got in there as well. Okay, this is from Colin, and he's from Derbyshire. Gents.
Ooh,
quite a good start, isn't it? Good, gents. I recently acquired a garden gnome.
Oh dear.
But my wife finds deeply unsettling. I, however, think he brings a certain je ne sais quoi to the rockery. What is your professional take on garden gnomes? Should they make a comeback or stay buried, literally?
Stay buried, literally.
Why?
They're horrible little things. They're
They're
creepy. They're
not.
creepy little things. Why would you want one of them? Have you ever? You probably like them actually. But would you ever put one in a garden? If I found one in a garden, I wouldn't keep it. I'd lob it. I'd put it out the front. Someone would take it away. Probably another gnome would walk off.
You're going to upset somebody if you did that.
I don't like gnomes.
Gnomes have a deep
Oh,
and interesting
historical.
history.
Yeah, here we go.
They do.
It doesn't matter. They're
Lamport
still
Hall in Northamptonshire is the first gnome.
There's also
This
things
guy-
got an interesting history. Doesn't mean you have to keep them.
He was a lunatic, basically. This mad guy who used to bring them over from Switzerland and Germany, and they are quite creepy and quite weird.
Yes.
These ones, and there was one.
Never
and
trust someone who's got a beard and no moustache.
That's also God. That is true.
They got the beardy thing with no moustache.
Yeah, no, that's sort of weird, the whole thing. But there are these ones. He put them in this rockery, built this rockery especially for it. I can't remember what his name was now, but it was.
I bet it looked great.
Lamport, and he loved it.
Yeah.
But what happened is that when he died, his children shot them all with an air rifle. But there's one that survived. It fell down the back of this rock and disappeared, and nobody found it for like 100 years after that. Right. And they found it, and they said, "Oh, it's the only surviving one. It's insured for £1 million. This gnome." So, but
I've got a feeling that Collins is.
I don't think
is
Collins
not worth
is
£1 million
as good as that.
quid.
I think
and
Collins,
if it is, sell it and do something else with the cash.
There's a place called Gnome World on the way to Cornwall that I've stopped up and looked at, and that's just you walk around this woodland and there's these, and it is quite freaky.
I would pay you not to go in there.
They're quite weird things. So what are we going to say to Colin?
No,
we're going to say get divorced for this or what?
Well, his missus wants it.
I think he likes it, but his missus finds it unsettling. So is it worth breaking up a happy marriage by saying just
you got to keep the missus happy.
Yeah.
You got
so
to
therefore you got to chuck out
just leave it out the front of the house. Someone will walk off with it.
Well, you say that with most things, but it doesn't. I'm not sure if anyone's going to walk off with it.
Well, then they'll chuck it in a skip.
Yeah.
Here we go. Rupert from Herefordshire. Dear Joe and James, I'm restoring an 18th century wall garden and want to plant it as authentically Georgian as possible.
Whoa.
The soil is heavy clay with poor drainage and there's old lead piping nearby. Is that a health and safety issue?
That one now.
What heritage fruit trees, herbs and flowers would have been typical back then, and how would you deal with the soil issues without compromising historical accuracy? Can you...
Okay, so the soil issues and the historical accuracy is irrelevant.
You're good at history. You're good at historical gardening. I mean, I've seen some Georgian gardens, and obviously the plant palette would be much more limited than anything.
I think you see, you said earlier that gardening is not governed by trend and fashion, but it is actually, and that's one of the good reasons for it. In the Georgian times, when old Joseph Paxton was doing his stuff, quite limited the amount. I mean, every year new things would come in that have been plundered from different corners of the empire. But if you want to make something absolute, there's a historically accurate garden at Hampton Court, which is the Privy Garden.
Yes,
and you walk around it, and you think.
It's all out of proportion.
Yeah,
it's all
exactly
too small. I mean,
like,
the little cones
and sort of one plant here, and then there's a gap, and there's another plant there. And so my advice to Rupert is just don't even think about it.
No,
really.
But you could create something maybe sort of Georgian with a
Georgian
that
feeling to it,
twist, as they say in garden design.
I did a Georgian garden in Camberwell.
There's sort of sense of formality.
Yeah, it has to say, but basic Georgian garden is, is a pathway, because you've got to think that the people who own the garden and who use the garden are not the gardeners.
Yeah.
So it's actually a different thing. So you basically you've got Joe Swift and Mrs. Swift.
Quite formal.
And so you walk around it and you look at the plants, and they're a sort of a curiosity. And so it would almost be if it was in a small, I mean, this is a wall garden, so you'd have the plants around the edge and then you have a bit of lawn in the middle. So it would be quite... I mean, it'd be okay, but compared to what you could do now,
that's the thing. It wouldn't really be a versatile sort of usable space. How we use gardens now, it would be a historical sort of
a museum exhibit.
Well, yeah.
Really. It'd be like a reenactment, not
and also materials. You couldn't use any modern material. I mean, you couldn't put a great big stainless steel water feature in the middle, because that's what you'd want to do.
Obviously,
but you go
glass.
It's got the ones I've seen,
crushed CDs,
gravel chipping. It's gravel chipping, stone edging. Maybe some brick.
Yeah,
and that's probably it as far as material.
You can't use a digger. You have to do it with a man with a wooden spade.
Well, that's the second part. Okay, the soil, the heavy clay soil.
I mean, heavy clay. I mean, these are two completely different questions. One is a question of design and aesthetics, and the other one is a question of horticulture. The lead pipe is. I feel that's
the lead pipe is a red herring.
I think it is, unless it's Professor Plum with the lead piping in the walled garden.
In the walled garden.
Yeah,
that's what it all is. Cluedo.
Go down that direction. I think it's a Cluedo garden. I think he's got a nice idea to do.
But not only that.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, we've had another one. Can we move? We can move on from Rupert.
We're going to finish this one. Poor Rupert's going to feel unsatisfied. He's sitting there hanging on. We need to polish him off.
Heritage fruit trees, herbs and flowers.
Ask Jekka.
Okay, so Jack, hey guys.
Yeah.
I'm new to gardening, but I somehow inherited a patch of land behind my flat. It's wild and I kind of like the jungle vibe, but I'd love to know how to grow stuff I can actually eat without getting poisoned. What's a good low effort, high reward crop for someone who mostly forgets to water things?
Has he got any sunshine, do you think?
Well, I don't know.
Should we assume that they've got sunshine?
We've got to have most veg you need some sunshine for, don't you?
Let's make the assumption that we're going to. Okay, so
the easiest stuff to. I mean, salad leaves. They're cut and come again salads. They literally come up like cress.
Yeah.
You can sow them onto the ground. Obviously, you got to create a weed-free bit of ground, but you can also grow them in pots quite well. And you literally broadcast sow, which is just sprinkling them on the top. Water the soil first, otherwise you move them all around because they're tiny little seed. But things like the Mizuna, Mabuma, I know. Or you can get like Mediterranean mixes, or you can get like a spicy, Eastern mix of like mustards and things, which are really good. So you water the soil first, sprinkle them on there, and within a few weeks you get your kitchen scissors and you start cropping them as they're sort of like very small little salads.
Yeah.
And then they just cut and come. That's what they call cut and come again salads. So that's the quickest reward you're going to get for edibles.
I would. Okay,
they're quite wild looking, I guess, as well.
I think it's quite cool. I'm going to go in a different direction. But I mean, I think that's a really good idea because the thing about lettuce is it doesn't taste the same if you buy it than if you grow it. It's one of the things. It needs to be fresh. It needs to be still breathing when it gets to your plate. Basically, is what it is. So the other things because it's a bit wild. I would go raspberries.
Yes,
because they're quite good and they grow wild anyway. Because they're always sending up runners and they're there. And a raspberry is the perfect berry because it's the only one that's actually built with a place to put the cream.
Yeah, they're my favourite fruit as well.
See, that's why I'm doing it. And you could also do black currants if you wanted to, but they're okay.
And wild strawberries. So you're thinking more perennial,
I'm thinking
shrubby,
more perennial
bushy
stuff,
and perennial.
But then for my annuals, I would grow pumpkins. Mm-hmm. Because they're fun, they're easy, they're straightforward, they're sort of quite interesting. You can get lots of different varieties.
And squashes.
They actually taste good, and they keep for a long time.
And squashes, and they spread.
Yeah, they
cover ground.
They cover ground. So a bit of cut and come again, bit of squashy, pumpkiny action, and then some perennial fruit.
Yeah,
that's Jack sorted. We are so hip.
Jack, yeah, 22.
22.
He's 22. It's nice that he's getting into growing stuff.
Were you gardening at 22?
I was landscaping. I started landscaping when I was about 20. And then I went to Australia. I landscaped Australia.
You've done a good job.
Yeah.
Until it burnt down.
Ayers Rock, they don't call it Ayers Rock now, but that was quite tricky. It took a weekend.
Yeah, it's a rockery.
Yeah, because I couldn't get the top bit. It was,
it's still not quite right,
Yeah, but it was really good working over there. I worked there for a year, and that was the whole outdoor room, decks, jacuzzis, using the garden as a totally different. It was a versatile outdoor space. Okay, they got the climate for it, but I was building and for a couple of quite good designers out over there and having the time of my life. Frankly, it was brilliant.
You came back. I thought I went to Australia for the first time.
What do you mean you were surprised I came back? I didn't even know you then.
No.
And you missed me
I would
already.
I would have missed you so much. But no, I went to Australia the first time in 2019 or something.
Yeah.
And I thought if I'd come here when I was 20, I would never have come back again.
Well, my mum thought I was never coming back. When she dropped me off at the airport, apparently she cried on the way home. She told me that anyway. She thought I wasn't going to come back.
And
I did. Well, a year later.
Like a bad smell.
Christmas, you can't have Christmas in Australia.
I love Christmas in Australia.
It's on a beach with the Barbies, man.
No, that's nice.
It's wrong.
You get swimming and all that kind of stuff.
No, it's wrong.
Louis, our producer is waving at us, which means that we have to shut up at this point and leave the stage.
Yeah, but thanks for joining us. It's been fun, hasn't it?
It's been a really, really nice time. What we'd like you lot to join in this conversation as well. And what they need to do is to email us at
Jimmy, I know it. It's gardening@scribehound.com.
That's the one. Send us in your gardening questions on whatever subject you possibly want and see if we can help with that.
Well, hopefully it's gardening related, though.
Gardening related, but no dead or dying plants.
Certainly not.
So we will be back next week. We will be talking about...
next week we're talking about the Great British Lawn.
Well, hey, good for us. And so we're going to be talking about all of that. There's an awful lot to get stuck into there. I hope that you will enjoy it. I think we've had a nice time today.
We've had a really nice time. Thanks for joining us. It's been fun.
Come and subscribe to Scribehound Gardening by looking at the link in our bio. And also, if you come back every day, if you're a subscriber, you'll be able to listen to the articles read by the authors. So until next week.
Bye-bye. See you then.